Hey there, Personal Health and Wellness. Welcome to Substance Abuse. And our conversation today is going to be a very important one. Remember, I talked to you a little bit about the difficulties that we all commonly share and the idea that change is something that we have a key to if we have education. Education being the key, but we still have to unlock the door, and that's the effort part that we have to put forth. Now, that being said, I want you to understand that with substance abuse, there's a lot of folks out there who think, well, that person should just quit doing that. They should just quit smoking. They should quit drinking. Should quit using marijuana. They should quit using cocaine. They should quit using methamphetamines. And there is a entire population with that mentality out there. And I am going to tell you that we have gotten we've gotten nowhere using that mentality. Our rates are still going up. And so it's time for us to look at this from a different perspective. My job here is to educate you on what some of the risks are out there, but also to talk to you about where you can find help, where you can point loved ones in the direction of help. But at the end, I hope that I've given you some information to also change maybe your perception into a person's life who experiences addiction and substance abuse problems. So with that being said, let me first tell you that I'm not going to use a PowerPoint on today's presentation. What I am going to use is two websites. Number one, the psychiatry.org website that I'm on right now behind me. Number two is healthypeople.gov. And in fact, I'm going to use healthypeople.gov for multiple future presentations because it is a resource that I want you to know is out there, but also to be able to come back and reference, but also utilize for the tools and the resources that are available through that website. So to begin, I want to first address what is addiction. This is a term that you probably are very familiar with, but let's give it some real tangible content so that you can work off of this. Number one, addiction is a complex condition, a brain disease that is manifested by, watch this, compulsive substance use despite harmful consequences. So regardless of the bad things that are happening in a person's life, they're still continuing in this very unhealthy cycle of substance abuse. And so what are the substances? Well, that could be tobacco, that could be alcohol, that could be drugs, that could be prescription drugs, that could be pornography, that could be so many different things that are damaging our very valued relationships. And so that is where we have to really pivot for our definition of addiction. The number two thing I want you to look at here is there are actual changes in the brain's wiring that cause a person to have those intense cravings. And so when they're using those different substances we just talked about, or maybe they're viewing pornography, those things change a person's brain wiring. And that's what's very dangerous, but also something that we as the outsider need to look at and say, this person needs something more than just my contempt. They need something more than my judgment. And they have a physiological change that has occurred. And so with that, how do I address that person and engage them to choose better, healthier options than what they are currently pursuing? Number three thing that I want to address is, according to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, people begin taking drugs for a variety of reasons. And I'd like for you to look over here. Number one, they want to get high. We know that that's one of the reasons. That's probably the most common thing that you've heard. But number two, they want to use it to relieve stress. They want to use something to kind of set that off a little bit and edge or get away from that edge that they typically live on. Number three, and this one is really incredible to me, improved performance. I've shared with you how much I have an interest in performance. And I want you to know that I've never used any type of performance enhancement drugs, but the temptation is so, man, it's just really real to me because I see what it can do. I just have this crazy interest to know, the story of Lance Armstrong and different cyclists who have used things like EPO and blood doping. And I'm like, man, those are things that, I just want to know what that's like. And I'm just confessing to you because I want you to know that I'm a real person too. And gosh, if I could improve my performance by doing a little blood doping, why wouldn't I try that? That's my own stuff, right? But there's an ethical situation there. And we could talk about that for the entire class, but that ethical situation has to find itself in a place that has higher resolve than performance does. And then the fourth thing, gosh, I mean, we are all curious and we have peer pressure, don't we? We have experienced that our whole life, and I have to tell you that as an adult, it it doesn't get easier. It's still difficult to deal with your peers and to know that comparison is still out there, and that we still deal with that. And if you could find the answer to how to deal with that, then I want you to come and be a guest speaker in my class, and we're going to put you on because that is a critical issue in today, and has always been. I want to bring you down to this next part here, and that is the symptoms of substance abuse disorder. These are things that we know are going on with a person who has an abuse disorder, or a use disorder. And number one is they have impaired control. They have a strong urge, and these people are constantly focused, and when it said compulsive, they're compulsive at how to get that substance, and they have a desire or failed attempts to cut down on controlled substance use. Number two is they have social problems, which means that substance that they use can definitely challenge their ability to maintain relationships, to maintain work, to hold down a job. You've probably heard this before. The bum can't hold down a job. Well, listen, it's not that he's a bum, and it's not that he can't hold down a job. Remember, there's some physiological changes that have occurred. And this person, again, they don't need our contempt. They don't need our judgment. They need our help. They need our support. Number three, risky use. There's a lot of risk that goes involved with that. I mean, that they share needles in some cases, that certain abusers of substances will share needles. They'll also put themselves at high risk in high risk sexual situations. But there's just a lot of different things that go on right there. But the website basically saying substances used in risky settings and continued use despite known problems. So the risk of just knowing that there's problems that could occur, but they're going to defer and just still use that anyways. And then the drug effects. Tolerance is a huge issue because we develop that very quickly, and so therefore it takes more of said substance to get same effect. And that's where abuse comes in. So with that, I'd like to point out, there's a lot of talk here about treatment of addiction, and I'm just going to give you these 3 steps right here. Number one, hospitalization is typically first because we cannot ask a person who has a true substance abuse addiction problem to just quit without some type of help. And inpatient help, hospitalization, is a great way to start. The question is, where does a person go? And I'm going to show you here in just a few minutes where some options are. Number two, a therapeutic community, joining a group that is in the same boat as you. And these are like Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, different groups that get together about tobacco cessation, smoking cessation. Those are the ones who really stand out there and help that patient. And then there are other outpatient programs too that go on longer for that. And those are out there as well. And we're going to kind of show you a few of those as we progress through the class today. So I'm going to go ahead and skip on into healthypeople.gov, and you can find this website very easy. Right up here is the URL, healthypeople.gov. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here to topics and objectives. This is an incredible website. Number one is they are looking at Healthy People 2020. And if you just happen to see, there is a trailer for what's going to happen for healthy people 2030. And every decade, they're setting new goals. They're looking at new health indicators and developing ideas from major stakeholders across the globe to make this world better. So when I look at my topics and objectives and I scroll down, there is a topic specific to substance abuse as well as to tobacco use. And I want to click this and I want to show you some things. Number one, their goal here is to reduce substance abuse and protect the health, safety, and quality of life for all, especially children. And that's something that I'm going to talk a lot about today is what do we do for our kids to prevent that generation from being exposed? And that's a very difficult task because that's happening regardless of our efforts as parents, but also as loved ones. And so let me kind of go into this and let's take a look. Number one thing here, why is a substance abuse study important for us? Well, take a look at some of the problems associated with substance abuse. Number one, teenage pregnancy. Those are situations, even though they've been glorified by MTV, they are not glorified situations because what we know is that that's a very difficult situation for the mother, for the child, many times for the male or the father because of their undetermined attachment into that situation. And so that's a big issue. Number two, HIV and AIDS. We know that these are real issues. Although I have to admit, I don't hear about it as much as I used to, but there's still things going on out there. STDs are going on, domestic violence, child abuse, motor vehicle accidents, physical fights, crime, homicide, and suicide. Now, none of these things really shine as positive things. So what we have to do is understand that these are the negative issues that are screaming out to us saying, please pay attention to substance abuse. If you know someone who's abusing a substance, please give them attention. Don't just defer them. And I'm talking to myself because I have a person or two in my life who I know need that help. And it's very difficult sometimes to go out there and help them because of their resistance to wanting to receive that help. So let me go down and say this. There's a couple of things here. Number one, the National Institute of Drug Abuse. Number two, Monitoring the Future survey. Those both have some pretty good information, and I want to kind of just throw some things out there for you to see. Number one, a drop in the past year use of methamphetamine was reported for all grades. Now, wait a second. That means all grades, K through 12. What we did see was that there was a drop in the past year of methamphetamine use, but that's telling us that through K through 12, methamphetamine use is going on. Some of you, that's a slap in the face. You've never heard that before, and you needed to know that. Number two, among 10th and 12th graders, there's 5-year declines were reported for the past year use of amphetamines, cocaine. Isn't that wonderful that we're seeing between 12th and 10th grade that there's a decline over the last 5 years in amphetamines? Oh, and by the way, cocaine. That's incredible that they would ever even have access to that, but they do. In 2009, it gives you some very unique stats here. And then I want to scroll down here to this one right here, Understanding Substance Abuse. And I want to point out just one very important statement here. And it says this, that we have finally gotten to some evidence-based practices for drug and alcohol treatment. That's pretty recent. What you have to understand is that in the 1960s, when a lot of illicit drug use was going on, and it was going on before that, but when we really started to see the growth of it, all the way now into the 2020s. So right along for 60 years, now we have some data to work off of. And what we know is that just shaming a person, telling them that they're wrong and they should stop, doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And so what does work? Well, there are some evidence-based things going on there, which means we have research that says, hey, look, this is actually working, and we can see some benefits going on. Lots of emerging issues, and I would highly recommend that you kind of look through that. But I'm going to take you back to the top, and I'm going to go over here to interventions and resources. And like I said, I'm going to talk a lot about some kid stuff today, some children, because I think that drugs, substance abuse, alcohol, and tobacco, the use in school-age kids, that's something that's very passionate to me to bring to you and to help you understand. And so I am going to get into that. One of the things, though, that I want to start with is a strategy on drinking, and how to drink in moderation, because I fear that many times we don't always know these things. And this is pretty simple stuff. Number one, what moderate amounts of alcohol truly is. Well, if you look right here, it's 1 drink a day for a woman. It's 2 drinks a day for men. That's moderate use. And then what does a drink actually constitute? Well, that's a 12-ounce beer, whether that's a can or a bottle. It's a glass of wine, not a bottle of wine, which many times that happens. You know, I've got some friends who say, well, I drink that whole bottle of wine. That's not just a drink. That's a lot. You're talking from 5 ounces up to a liter or two. And then a shot of liquor or spirits like gin, rum, or vodka, that's just 1.5 ounces. That's 1 shot. And so that's what a drink is. Some things to say about risk here is, number one, what drinking too much can cause, and that's liver disease, heart disease, depression, stroke, stomach bleeding, and then cancer. Very specifically, oral cancer of the mouth, throat. Also, we see a lot of cancers in the stomach and then in the colorectal area. But then the worst being that of the liver. And that's just if the cancer is involved. But what we know is that cirrhosis is a liver damage that is irreversible and typical of alcohol, long-term alcohol use. And so I come down here and I look and I want to see this real quick. This should be really common sense to us. Don't drink if you are pregnant or trying to get pregnant. If you're under 21, why? Because it's unlawful. Why should you not drink if you're pregnant or trying to get pregnant? Well, here's the deal. We know that alcohol lowers the ability of a woman and a man to have good reproductive health. There's a lot of reasons why, but we've made that connection. That's easy. Do a Google search as to what goes on with you of a female or a male, and how it affects your reproductive health, and you'll find a ton of information. But what we also know is if you're pregnant, please defer alcohol completely. There are some studies out there that may suggest differently, but there's also a lot out there that suggests low birth weights, damage to the fetus and the baby, long-term birth problems, but we have seen that time and time again. And so the risk far outweighs anything that you're going to get from alcohol. And if you are pregnant and you have an alcohol abuse problem, then seek out the help that you need, and I hope that you will do that. Are you recovering from alcohol use or disorder? If so, you shouldn't drink. If you take certain over-the-counter prescription medications, you shouldn't drink. You're going to see that when we look at some different drug bottles. But also, it's very important not to drink if you plan to drive a car or use a machine. This is something you've heard for a very, very long time. Next, set limits. And that is, you're going to tell your friend, this is how much I'm drinking tonight and no more. And that's a great way to do it because you have an accountability person there. But also, set limits personally through the week. And it says here, for men, don't drink more than 2 drinks a day. For women, no more than 1 drink a day. That's just a very logical way to do it because that keeps you in that moderate drink threshold. This one is very nice here because it talks about making a plan and learning how to resist social pressures to drink and practicing your strategies on how to urge to drink. I want you to click on these and view these right here because they'll help you answer some questions that are on your quiz that I'm not going to get a chance to address in the lecture here. Also, another thing you might want to look at is how many calories are in your drink. Many of us are consumed with the idea of how many calories we take in a day. I'm going to try to debunk that for you at the end of the semester and make you not so concerned about calories as much as you are concerned about macronutrients. But the reality is that those calories do count, and they're empty calories. That means they're going to get stored as fat. Because of the sugar that is released through alcohol, that's just what's going to happen. And so you're going to really get a benefit of nothing from those calories, where energy is just not going to come from those, but fat is. And that's just not a healthy way to go either. And so setting that drink limit, staying within that moderate level, that's the safe bet. I do also want to show you this. And this is where do we go to get help. If you think you have a drinking problem, here are some locations via the internet that you can click on and find your help. This is a clickable link, and I just want to go ahead and do this real quick for you and show you something. I'm going to enter in Poto's zip code, and what it's going to do is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration is going to identify for me 2 places right here that I could use to help me with my drinking problem. It has the Cowboys, it has Sequel Care, and it has VHSO in Fort Smith. So all different areas that specialize with alcohol abuse. I want to go back here to this link and show you this number, 1-800-662-HELP. That is the phone number you can dial, and that will get you a person that will help you with your drinking problem. And then finally, the NIAAA, Alcohol Treatment Navigator. This is a great little tool as well on what to do if you are concerned with substance abuse disorder or alcohol abuse disorder. So, that being said, we've given you some resources there. I do want to take you back to this right here, and I want to show you this little spot right here. And this was the Talk to Your Kids About Tobacco, Alcohol, and Drugs. And I want to show you just a few things here real fast. But number one, what do you need to say? Well, when you're talking to your kids about drugs, alcohol, and tobacco, first of all, you need to find out what your child already knows. It's going to surprise you. If you have kids, this is going to blow your mind what they already know. I have 4 kids, and so I've already talked to a few of them about this, and that's the only talk we've had. We're going to talk about the sex talk in the next module, and that's not something I've had yet, luckily, but it's coming. Number 2, teaching your children the facts. This is where it's your responsibility to come in as that person's parent, but also a loved one, and just say, listen, these are facts you need to be aware of on what this substance can do. And that's basically what I've shared with you here. But you may want to go in more depth and even show them some things on the internet of what's factual. Give your child clear rules. That's another thing, that my kids are not going to be able to use tobacco as long as they live in my house. That's a clear rule. I've just made that for them already. Number 4, be prepared to answer your child's questions. And then number 5, talk with your child about how to say no. And that would really be best if you do that through some role play. Let them practice, right? Number 2, when to start. I have some sobering things here for you. Almost 9 of 10 smokers start before they turn 18. That's a quiz question. And it's very staggering to me that most of our smokers have started before they even turned the legal age to try it. Number 2, by the time they're in 8th grade, most children think that using alcohol is okay. That's a society issue where we have kind of pronounced that it's okay. And I'm going to say that I'm weird and tell my kids that it's not okay. Number 3, at age 12 or 13, some kids are already using drugs like marijuana and prescription pain medication. And that is way too young, in my opinion, for either of those two. But I look at this and I think, my goodness, how are they accessing these things? And I must tell myself, surely it's not the parents who are giving that to them. But then I think, it probably is. So we go in here and we look at some other things about medicine misuse, over-the-counter drugs. I want you to understand what those are, but I also want you to understand that there are some commonly misused prescription drugs and what those are. Number 1, opioids, painkillers. That is your hydrocodones, your Percocets. Those are the big ones. What we also know, though, is some things for anxiety and sleep are abused. So you could look at any type of the sleep medications that you are aware of, and why they would be abused because of the relief of stress. Because if they're going to help you go to sleep, a lot of people struggle there. So that would be a very easy, simple abuse issue to come in. Also, hands down, why I have really refused to even try a sleep medication in several moments in my life where I've struggled with sleep. I mean, the worst I've ever done was NyQuil. Um, and so I know that it does help me sleep, but I really have to watch myself because I don't want to develop a dependency on that. But anxiety, another issue, something that I've also personally dealt with. And I want to tell you that with anxiety, what you have to think about is that people who have real anxiety, if they're taking a medication and they're finding some relief for that, we fall into this, well, more must be better, or we develop chemical tolerance. And that is where dependence comes in. And then the third thing, and this one is really interesting to me, ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, one that's really close to me and my family. Um, there are several drugs out there. They are stimulants. And apparently, and I did not know this until recently, they are highly sought after for abuse, and they're very difficult to obtain from a doctor, and they're very difficult to move past with getting your kids off of them because they do work, but they're also a drug, and there has to be a point where we start looking for a time to get away from those. So now we want to look at this. Why do I need to talk to my children? Because they get hurt in car accidents, because they have serious trouble in school, because they can become a victim of a crime, or they can be a criminal themselves, and they have problems with addictions as adults. And so those are all very critical issues that I think that we need to look at. I want to come back now to substance abuse. I want to come back over here to Healthy People 2020, and I want to go in and I want to look real quick before we lose our time to tobacco use. Um, Tobacco has many things to it, and what you're going to see in the next video that we're going to spend a little more time on tobacco with is how cancer and other things are related to. So what I want you to do is go ahead and log out. Take a minute to kind of view over some of that content that we just covered. Get ready to come back in the video too, and we're going to talk about tobacco specifically and give it its own time. I hope that you enjoyed this first part of the video. I hope that I've given you some things to think about. But before I leave, let me say this one more time. My patients, my friends, my family, they don't need my contempt or my judgment. My patients, my friends, my family, they need my compassion and they need my empathy. And if we all address substance abuse this way, then I think we're going to find some real answers. Hope you enjoyed. Talk to you soon.